All right. The digs are a little bit different, aren't they?
You have a painting.
I do, and we got some all kinds of other shit around. Yeah.
A daughter made something.
Yes, we got some arts and crafts. We've got some natural rights stuff back here on my left shoulder. So yeah, this is Ungovernable. I'm Matt. This is Jocelyn. Tonight we have some really good stuff to talk about. You want to get into the wine really quickly?
I picked it, but I know nothing about it. I just loved the.
I mean, it's from California. I'm like, you can't.
No,
really
I just loved
go wrong.
The label.
So this is Unshackled.
But show it up close because it's like super cool. It looks
Unshackled. All right.
It looks like something that. What are those codes? You do the codes.
Oh yeah, like a decoder thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is Cabernet Sauvignon. It's from Oakville, California.
I could be wrong, but I think this was a little more expensive than usual.
We try and keep it non-bougie. Like, what are you talking about?
$25.
That's I don't know. That's on.
But I liked the label that much.
That's on the border of bougie. But anyway, all right. So you do the honors as usual. All right. I am going to make sure that we have the stream set up for everyone. Rance Whiskey goes ironic. It says Unshackled from California.
That's so true.
Yeah, well,
that's so true.
The winemaker hasn't made it to the gulag just yet. So, but yes, that is a deep seated irony. All right, so we have a couple of things to talk about. You all right? You got it?
No, I've never seen this opener before.
Oh,
from where it was from.
We have a pile of openers that I pulled it from.
Where did you get this from?
It's from
Fedway.
Fedway. What? Dude, get rid of that. I didn't even see that. So anyway, all right. So we're gonna talk about a bunch of stuff tonight. Does it smell good? Good news.
Oh, it's really interesting.
Interesting, like barnyard. I don't mind barnyard because I like Bordeaux. Yeah, it's definitely
really interesting.
It smells like weed. Smell that? It does smell like weed.
It's very interesting.
Sorry, herbal refreshment. So anyway,
what it is? I just stuck my nose in it though.
We are in a new space, so we changed around the house.
The entire house.
Yeah, almost. Well, half the house, at least half the house.
Not the entire house.
Let's see. 3 bedrooms changed. The closet got reclaimed by us, and that was my office, and now this is the office.
The toy room.
Yeah,
the pantry,
and the pantry got moved from here to another part of the house.
Our 5-year-old wanted her own room.
Yes, yeah. So this was a big change.
Bittersweet. I miss her.
It is difficult. Actually, that is a very big line of
12
demarcation.
years of having kids sleep in our bed.
Yeah, it's like
it's never. It's
on and off.
13 years because Veronica's going to be 13.
Well, on and off. Yeah, I mean, like
the whole time there was no off.
Well, no, for a time we had. This is how big of hippies we are. For a time we had a bedroom that literally had. Were all 5 of us in the same room at one point in time?
Yeah.
At one point in time, we were an immigrant family with like 5 people in one room.
We had like a kind of bunk bed.
We had like a bunk bed.
Veronica Cole.
And then like
and then the 3 of us in the king.
Larger than king extension kind of situation.
And it was on the floor too, so no one got hurt.
Yes,
this is like it's only been a year since we've had beds on frames.
We are big co-sleeping people. We believe in co-sleeping. Actually, a lot of people in Western medicine will try and tell you that co-sleeping is dangerous because of SIDS. We actually have done a lot of research that we found that SIDS is less likely if you have co-sleeping involved. But so that was a big change.
13 years
to move around 5 rooms in basically, what did it take us? 3 days, 4 days?
You didn't help that much. You just did.
What are you talking about?
You did your closet.
That's not true at all.
Yes.
That is not true at all.
I just take California king mattress upstairs.
Yeah, you brought a bed up
by myself,
and me and Cole brought a bed down.
So much easier.
Yeah, well,
but I also did both the bed frames.
We were just smarter than you, but you said you got it stuck and you couldn't move it, and so we had to come do some stuff. So anyway,
easy.
So we are in a new space. I would love to take recommendations in terms of what you guys are looking for decoration. So I have an absolutely fantastic painting that none other than Mike Rufo's wife Sheba did that has 4 of the most epic libertarian / anarchist gentlemen or people that I've read in recent history.
It's really good.
Is it? What is it?
It's really good.
Is it drier
I have
or is
no
it?
clue. I drink cheap wine, but I really like it.
Oh wow, that's
It's
really good.
really good.
Yeah,
For
it's really good.
$25, I think it's really good.
It better damn well be for $25. But then again, $25 nowadays is like $5, you know, a couple weeks ago. But
I cut you off.
Yeah, so we've got a little decoration in here. I'm definitely looking for recommendations for what's happening over here, mostly on the wall. Yeah. I was thinking Gadsden flag. I was thinking black flag or the skull and crossbones.
You should do a chakra.
We could do chakra. You know what would be cool is if I had chakra right next to the Boog flag. I think that would go really well together. You're not really familiar with the Boog flag,
I don't know the Boog flag.
We'll talk about the Big Igloo one in these days. It might be closer than you think. And actually, interestingly enough, before we start talking about deprogramming, we have a news story that is breaking today that we're going to talk about with the whole Trump thing. You
mentioned it, but I don't know much about it.
This is like, it kind of ties into the Boog thing, maybe? The Big Igloo? I don't know.
Today.
Well, yeah, Olivia Newton-John.
That's been my news feed.
That was these boots are made for walking. That's her thing.
That's Patsy Cline.
Oh, that's Patsy Cline. Yeah.
No,
what was Olivia?
Grease. You know,
Grease.
Oh yeah. So fast.
Come on, man. I'm not a 16-year-old girl. I don't know that.
Oh come on. Stop. You know.
R.I.P.
Let's get physical.
I do know that song. Yes. Yeah. I don't know if I ever wanted to get physical with Olivia Newton-John, but
yeah, that's the best.
So we have R.I.P. Olivia Newton-John. We have breaking news. So, no,
what is
not an advertisement?
That is breaking news.
So apparently, FBI agents raid Mar-a-Lago in Florida while Trump was up here in New Jersey playing golf right down the street at his in Basking Ridge at his club, right? So apparently they raid his home in Florida, and the story goes that they were looking for documents that when he was president, he took from the National Archives to Mar-a-Lago and never returned them. But so then,
why do you raid for that?
Why do you have to
could you give
raid
them back to us?
The property for the documents to return to the National Archives? So they're trying to say that, it's about national security and all this other stuff. I don't know. Yeah, that's that's extremely sus.
Why wouldn't they just say, "Could you give those back to us?"
Yeah, you would think they write a letter or I'm pretty sure they have them on.
Well, what is happening?
I'm pretty sure they have his cell phone number.
I don't pay attention to the news anymore. But what's happening with the whole insurrection thing? Is that partly maybe why they're doing that?
Well, no, they're continuing to go on with this whole January 6th trial situation. Plus, you have the Alex Jones trial that's going on at the same time.
That has nothing to do with Trump.
It doesn't. So, a lot of people would argue it comes from the same place. It comes from this political kind of battle that's happening at the top as far as the narrative is concerned. Okay, maybe it's not involved. I mean, Alex Jones was stupid enough to call a bunch of parents that lost their kids in a mass shooting crisis actors. Okay, which they were obviously not crisis actors. Now, does it change the fact that maybe the FBI already knew or the ATF already knew that this thing was going to go down? No, that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't. But yeah,
I did see weird stuff about. I didn't know if it was Alex Jones. I did see some stuff about crisis actors with some of these shootings. People would pick out pictures of someone who looks exactly the same.
Yeah. From
one shooting to another shooting.
Yeah.
And they'd be but I don't know if that was Alex Jones stuff.
That stuff is
and also. I don't know if that's also, what's that called?
Yeah.
That's doctored.
Yeah, that stuff is also comes down to the laziness of media outlets, because a lot of times they will use recycle the same pictures.
Yeah.
And
with monkeypox.
But it's not just laziness, because there's also the common thread of the narrative that we've all seen the video of all of the newscasters throughout the entire country using the same line the same way, right? But so yeah, I think this all kind of comes from a lot of the same place. I actually find it really interesting that they were so intent on making this a formal thing and raiding Mar-a-Lago as opposed to, writing a letter or having the Attorney General write a formal request or something like that.
Maybe it's like to rally the people before the election. On their side.
It's possible to show that they're being tough on crime. Right. They won't be tough on
Biden's son.
People or people stealing shit from Target or Walgreens, but they'll be tough on the orange man, So,
but that's to rally their troops.
Yeah, we're tough on white collar crime.
There's a lot going on.
Quite honestly,
I think there's a lot of stuff going on in preparation for November.
Quite honestly,
economically,
in the world of Lysander Spooner, these people are fighting at the top politically. Like it's titans that are fighting on Olympus against each other, and none of them give a fuck about you or me or anyone who's watching this program. Like they don't give a shit about you.
No.
Like the only amount that they might give a shit about you is just as a means to an end to their power or their control. Well, they would give a shit about
you if you all of a sudden gained a following and started to influence them in a bigger way, right? Like Alex Jones. Then they give a shit if you said the wrong thing.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Yeah,
but they don't give a shit.
Which what's funny is I didn't intend to make this episode about Alex Jones, but the one thing that was really interesting to me about the whole Alex Jones case was everyone, specifically people that were on the left, were claiming victory because I think they almost assume that because he's having these damages levied against him in the civil trial, that it invalidates all the other stuff he's ever talked about, which is completely wrong because I think that's the way that leftists think. Leftists think that if you have one smudge, right, everything else gets thrown out the window.
Oh, the leftists went out for Pfizer, and Pfizer's had many smudges before the vaccine.
Well,
you can't. The logic does not compute from one to the next.
Yeah, but they don't see companies the same way that they see people.
Oh, that's a shame.
They don't. Yeah, no, they don't see corporations the same way. I mean, what's great is freaking Bernie coming out against this, fighting inflation bill, and Bernie Sanders of all people, who is he's like a broken clock. He's right twice a day. He's like this. This is tax breaks for the millionaires and the billionaires. Voice. It's very close to the same. It's very close to the same, right? So Bernie comes out and he's like, yeah, this is tax breaks for the millionaires and billionaires. This is not fight inflation. All it does is pass off the tax requirements to the middle class and the lower income earners.
Right now, Biden was fighting against when he got into election. He was like, I'll tax the millionaires.
No, didn't remember
that what he said?
Didn't remember Biden? No. If you make $400, was it $400 or $450,000?
I don't know.
It was $400 to $450,000 or less. You will not see a penny increase in your taxes.
He was just going to tax the millionaires so we could all hate the millionaires.
Yeah, well, if you make $450 a year in New York City, you're probably not a millionaire because most of it's going towards fucking rent and your parking garage fee every single month. But no, he basically ran on not increasing taxes on people in the middle class and people lower income earners than the middle class.
But
and that's exactly what this inflation fighting bill is supposed to do.
It's so silly. They're all the same.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then here's the other complete lunacy of politics. I'm very much black flagged right now because all this stuff is just the stupidest crap I've ever seen in my entire life.
Pilled?
Yeah. I mean, the black pilled is it's all going down. I don't want to hear about it. Black flag is let's arm ourselves because it's going down. It's like collapsitarian type stuff. But no, a lot of the people on the left are smudging the people on the right because they voted against some of these bills, and the fighting inflation bill has a a negotiating insulin prices lower thing, and that's what they focus on. And it's it's hundreds of billions of dollars, okay? And the insulin portion of the bill is a fraction of a percent. Yeah. And then they go after the right and they're like, 50 Republicans woke up this morning and they decided that people didn't want affordable insulin. And you're like, yeah, because that's the only part of the bill.
Elected bills become so many things.
Oh, it's been
Like, that's
decades
just
now.
crazy.
No, it's been
Like,
decades
there
now.
shouldn't be, and it should be in easy, plain speak. And
No, it's
they're
become
all trying to hide
the
this shit.
payoffs in the bills to get them passed
Yeah,
are even bigger now than
It's
the main
crazy.
driving force of the actual
I
bill.
think it's just insane.
It is end stage, whatever you want to call it. Like I would call it state capitalism. It is end stage state capitalism is what we're in, because the payoffs become so big in order to get these things through that you end up nothing with nothing
the
but
bills are so big.
payoffs.
I mean, you're talking trillions of dollars, and these bills they're passing is just insanity.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, talking about really quick, just doing that deconditioning thing. We're
Yes.
talking about deconditioning today.
Well, we're supposed to be
But
talking about deprogramming, but
just
all right.
tell the thing you talked to me about, like the idea of like what we're conditioned to think. But I don't know how this meets. But you know how you were trying to explain to me $1 trillion in like grains of sand.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Like, explain that again. That's kind of like we're conditioned in a way. I don't know. I made a bridge, but it didn't work.
No, so I actually let me pull it up here, because there's something that let's say like $1 trillion football stadiums analogy. Okay, this is something that a lot of people, if you go and you Google, I think this is it, right? This is what $1 trillion looks like, right? And it's from Imagination Station or whatever. It tries to equate what $1 trillion is.
But $1 trillion isn't $1 trillion pennies.
Hold on, this actually
That's
is the wrong one. No. There's another one that essentially attributes it to, if you were to take $1 trillion, how many NFL stadiums, if you had nothing but $100 bills,
Yeah.
how many NFL stadiums $1 trillion would fill up? Just one.
Now
right?
are you talking the seats as well?
Well, yeah, the entire volume of the stadium. Okay, you're talking like a dozen stadiums worth of $100 bills. It is like a sick.
And stadiums are how many? But like, but we are so programmed to just, in a way, we don't get it. We're like, we can't conceptualize it. So we just kind of.
Well, what's great is the people that are always like, you
didn't help me.
In Zombie. Well, no, there could also be.
You can do it for me.
Hold on. Trillion grains of sand. Let's see. What would $1 trillion grains of sand fill? What does $1 trillion grains of sand look like?
You're looking on this. This isn't a great website.
Yeah, no.
What are you on this one?
This is like a Ask Me Anything kind of website.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, which is greater, the number of grains of sand on Earth, or, and then it gives you a whole list of things. No, I'm not ready for class on this, but the idea that the idea of $1 trillion. Okay, what's funny is everyone points to Zimbabwe and their like cases of hyperinflation, and the fact that they had like million and billion and $1 trillion like pieces of currency, single pieces of currency that were like $1 trillion
of currency
of your Zimbabwe dollars or whatever, right? The only difference between us and them is that we have a stranglehold on the central banking system on the planet.
Right.
So like our biggest export is debt and inflation. That's what we export around the world. It's like we don't export like.
Can you though make the
dishwashers
bridge between the analogy of $1 trillion to conditioning and programming?
Can you
make that happen? Because I feel like it's there. I can't put my. I had 2 beers already.
Well, no, I think the point you're probably trying to make, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that once you get to a certain event horizon, right?
Yeah.
The reality of these things that people are talking about just completely escapes you as
you don't even get it. Yeah, you don't even conceptualize.
There's no possible
once you
way
get
for you
to
even get it.
A certain level. That was a good bridge. That's what I'm talking about. That's what you're so good at.
Yeah, there you go.
I love it.
Yeah. That's why I get paid the big buck. No, it's actually kind of by design too. Like if you think about it, think of any kind of other profession that's out there. They have their own language. They have their own dictionary, their own terms, their own way of going about business. Okay. And it's one exclusionary And two, when you are on the outside looking in, it's not just exclusionary, it's also meant to confuse so that you don't question, right? So that you don't question. So when it comes to a bill that's hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars large,
crazy. You can't even wrap your head around it.
Here's the other thing. Like, say you're a single issue or a 2-issue voter, okay? And your issue is the environment, or your issue is abortion, or your issue is foreign interventionism and empire building, right? You're anti-war, okay? Every single one of these bills has an element of that mixed in with all the other hot button shit.
Everyone can be like, "Oh, yay for that one!"
Yeah, like this. Yeah, and so that's by design. That's not a mistake.
No,
that's by design.
It shouldn't be that way.
So that's why you get Democrats with this bill that are basically saying, "Oh, well, Republicans voted against affordable insulin for retirees and all this other stuff."
Not to mention, not to cut you off, but I totally cut you off all the time. But not to mention that fucking Congress gets paid enough. Put a few more days in their goddamn schedule to pass a few more bills instead of putting it all into the same fucking thing.
Oh, wait, hold on.
You know.
They need to be locked out of Congress and never pass another fucking bill again. Is what they need to do.
In the interim, these bills are insane.
What I think, what I would agree with is that they shouldn't
get paid that much.
They would never pass 90% of this shit if they had to do it on a single issue basis.
Right. They wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't have the votes for it.
So
how did we just change
that's part of the scam?
That is crazy.
No.
When did that change?
No, there is no we. Again, Lysander Spooner. There is no we.
But when did that change? When did we start? Was it always like that? Like bills came in, or was it always like?
No, it
can't be
a building process that has happened over 150 some odd years, right? The country's been in existence since so let's call it 1787, because I identify the Articles of Confederation as something that was actually better than the actual Constitution. But so from 1787 until present, okay, you're basically talking about 235 years, give or take, right? Those 235 years, the first handful of years were just kind of getting going and stuff like that. It's really been about 150 years where the line of demarcation is really the Civil War. I know a lot of people want to like label the Civil War as this, slavery versus anti-slavery kind of war. But there is so much built into the Civil War that people don't get taught in public school. They're just not taught. And truthfully, at the end of the day, whether you agreed with the premises of the South or not, at the heart of it is the idea of whether or not states get to control, their state versus DC.
Federal versus state.
Yeah. Okay. And the thing that people get wrapped up in is...
wait, you didn't answer my question.
Hold on, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But so what people get wrapped up in is, at the heart of the Civil War was an element of, who is a human and who gets natural and constitutionally protected rights. Okay. And whether or not DC gets to say who gets it or the state says who gets it. And what gets missed in that entire thing, and I'll get back to the money piece of it, is that a lot of people would say, well, DC needs to protect the human rights of people if the state interferes and infringes in their human rights. Purists would say that human rights are there regardless of whether or not the state says it is or not, right? And so purists would say that slaves were completely right if they were to rise up and take up arms against their masters because their natural rights were being infringed upon, right? So there's a big difference there. Everyone wants to act like it's just black and white or left and right, that kind of thing. So anyway, the Civil War establishes a different power structure in the United States. And so now the power structure begins to shift towards this centrally planned federalist or federal government system. And so once you get into that venue,
that's when they start.
Now the federal government has more leverage than all the rest of the states. And so they start to.
It cannot have been what it is today.
No.
I mean, we're talking.
It didn't start that way, but you know the phrase like, it happened gradually and then all at once.
What's it called? Pork belly?
No, pork barrel spending.
Pork barrel.
Yeah. And so they tried to introduce all these other things that are like, you know, against pork barrel bills and pork barrel spending and these amendments and stuff like that. It gets passed and then everyone just fucking ignores it because
that's so crazy.
Because
the
there's no
citizens
checks
should
and
be able to
balances.
get a lawyer to fight that shit.
No,
get like a huge, but then the lawyer would take everything.
No, the lawyer has a firing pin and a projectile that comes out of the end of the rifle. Like, I don't think people truly understand the beauty of the Anti-Federalists and the Bill of Rights. Like, the Anti-Federalists, they knew that this was going to happen, right?
But the Anti-Federalist papers were letters of people who were just average business people and people who lived in the communities.
Well, no, that was most people. I mean, like, yeah,
they were not the people in power.
A lot of the Federalists, like a lot of the more like pure Federalist type people, were closer to kind of these white collar kind of people versus, say, like working class people. The Anti-Federalists, though, some of them had these, you know, white collar kind of like, you know, lawyerships and stuff like that. But they knew, they saw it. They were like, we just fought a bloody revolution to get away from this shit, and you just want to remake it exactly the same way, and in who knows how long we're going to be in exactly the same place. And that's exactly what's happened. I mean, we took a country that was supposed to be a voluntary association of, at the time, 13 states. And is now, you know, 50 states plus multiple territories, and it's not voluntary anymore. It's everything's compulsory.
Well, in order to leave New Jersey, you have to pay them.
Well, yeah.
If you want to move, you have to pay a tax to move out of the state. That is fucking, isn't that?
And to stay in the state, you got to pay.
Not contortion. Consortium.
Wait.
What's the word I'm
extortion?
thinking? Extortion. Isn't that extortion?
No, that's fucking bullshit. Yeah, the word is bullshit.
No, but what is extortion?
No, extortion is when there's a gun held to your head and they make you pay for something.
But they make you pay.
No, there's technically a gun, because then they'll come to the other state that you move to, and
they're like, you pay us to leave you.
More current news.
Do other states have that?
We're actually not going to talk about deprogramming today.
Deprogramming. We're going to get there. But do other states have
part of?
You're not listening.
No, I'm listening to you, and I'm building a bridge. Part of the inflation fighting bill that was just passed is they want to hire
the tax people,
IRS people. How many?
87,000
IRS people. Okay.
Well, someone's got to give them jobs.
So it's extortion from the standpoint of, if you don't pay, right? Now, granted, that's a state level tax that they want you to pay in order to leave, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have state thugs that will coordinate with the other state thugs in the state that you move to try and be able to recoup that money or pull you back to the state and put you in debtor's prison, right? Mm-hmm. But it is so fucking telling that the bill that is the inflation fighting bill
needs to take more money from its citizens.
Includes 87,000 fucking IRS agents.
But think about what the jobs number is going to look like after that. Right? Like the jobs number is going to be fucking
it's
gonna
be amazing.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah,
and then Biden can go
yeah, exactly.
Right before November.
Yeah, look at that. I created so many
jobs. but those jobs are taking your goddamn money, and I will make sure I get it.
Yeah, they're not
because
productive
I have to pay
jobs.
for this shit.
They're not productive jobs.
That's one of those paper pushing jobs.
So so the idea that these bills have grown over time and gotten bigger, and these conglomerations and these kind of like multifaceted bills has just come from the standpoint that DC has become this power center that was never intended. It was well
when
I keep enacting Lysander Spooner. You need to read No Treason. So I keep enacting Lysander Spooner's
I had said to him, I said, I know who Ron Paul is.
Yeah.
And I said, you get to sit next to Ron Paul, but who the fuck am I sitting in front of?
There's some education that needs to take place. But in true Lysander Spooner-ness, the Constitution either set up what we have intentionally by design, or it was powerless to stop it. either way, it's deeply flawed.
Well,
because
this is my thing. Humans are deeply flawed. And that's my bridge to what we're talking about today. Humans are deeply flawed.
Well, yeah. So humans are deeply flawed. Why?
Because we're human.
Why would you ever give them control over your life?
Well, I don't know, but humans in general are deeply flawed. And I feel like power and greed are one of those things that absolutely, it's almost like Lord of the Rings, right? I'm not even a Lord of the Rings fan.
By the way, damn it, I should have pulled this up too, but I didn't know we were going to talk about it.
What?
There's a fantastic spoof video.
Stop.
That includes wokeness into someone's critique of the storyline of Lord of the Rings. And it's absolutely fantastic. Basically calling Frodo a white supremacist and basically saying that Gandalf was a white nationalist fighting the Balrog at the present. Anyway, so that's an aside. All right. So how are you going to tie this into programming? That's what I
don't know. What did I say?
Or deprogramming.
What did I say?
Yeah, you were talking about essentially.
Did I say something good?
Power and.
I know humans are flawed.
Yeah.
I just think humans are flawed.
Okay.
And I think that like in the end, we're going to fuck our own things up. Right. But we need to as a transcendental meditation person would say, transcend, right?
Mm-hmm.
And away from that.
Yeah.
But because we are flawed individuals, our parents were flawed, our teachers were flawed, our government officials are flawed. They're all flawed, and they have their own, ways of fucking us up. And we need to fucking clean that shit out.
Yeah.
And if we're going to transcend in any way, shape, or form, if we're going to make it right past whatever is going to be fucking burned down in the next few years,
February 2027,
then we have to be aware and acknowledge where we've been conditioned by those who are flawed. Yeah. Is that a good bridge?
Yeah. No, it's a perfect bridge. And I think it's important to note that the people or the institutions that have programmed you throughout your life, some of it was well-meaning, some of it was unintentionally flawed, and then some of it was intentionally programming. I mean, like I would make the argument that
did
public
education
probably
didn't even, but the teachers didn't know they were doing it. So there's like, there's also, it goes.
I mean, some of them.
I mean, in the end, we're humans.
I think some of them took some pleasure in the programming that they were putting out there.
I mean, there's, and like I think going through writing this book I'm writing on grief, I've had to jump into understanding the programming of parents, and kind of being aware and acknowledging how things are the same and different, and how they affect it, like the choices we make. And I say me really instead of we.
Yeah.
But and how freeing in a way it is to say, okay, that's why I made that. But you can't free yourself from it until you know it.
Yeah.
And that's the fucking deep, dark place of conditioning, is you don't know it until you know it. And it's like you don't understand until you understand. And it's a very insidious. Is that a word? Insidious, right?
Well,
insidious?
No. Insidious
is insidious.
But no, it's not necessarily insidious though. It's only insidious if it's like intentional harm, or.
But it isn't, because if you have a parent who has,
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not insidious from the standpoint of, I think people are trying to fuck you up. I think it's like people have their own baggage that they carry with them. Right. But part of the way that I put this episode out there was I want to talk about how, kind of people carry baggage into their life, or even parents, like we as parents have baggage that we then put on our children.
We're
right.
Like
that kind of thing, right?
And we don't mean to.
And it's really difficult. Like you could lead a life of what I would call ignorance and just be like, okay, well, that's just the way it is, right? Or if you choose to go down that path, you need to kind of start to dig to be like, all right, well, like why did they have that viewpoint, or why did they feel like that was the way to live your life, right?
Well,
and what was the inspiration, or what was the influence that came from?
one of my friends had posted something and sent me a thing today, and it was all about a Buddhist thing she had gone to. And she had said, she sent me this thing from the Buddhist retreat, and it was about the wounds, the places that were hurt the most. And no one wants to look at them, right? It sucks to look at them.
Yeah.
But those are sometimes our biggest gifts. And if we can see where we're wounded the most, if we can see where, and so just to make an aside, I was telling you before, Amy had said how interesting it was to have that crossroads where I come at it from this transcendental, meditation or human design, not
like
human
from
design,
a spiritual standpoint.
and you're coming at it from this governmental, like all the programming that's done in the schools and by the government and all this, right?
I would say I'm more,
and we kind of meet.
I would say I'm more, would you call it analytical about it, or I'm more kind of like not philosophical, but I'm more kind of like I want to look at the structure, I want to look at the architecture of it, right? You're more about kind of like the common threads. Like you're not necessarily worried about getting way down in the details. What you're concerned about is more so those things that tie stuff together and are those kind of like common bonds.
I mean, look, it came to me the other day. Like, I was telling you the other day, I had a lot of death in my life. And I thought everyone was telling me I should be angry about my parents dying, right? And I wasn't angry. And then I had this session and we did a lot of work deconditioning. And I realized the whole time.
For people listening, what kind of session did you have?
Oh, it was a quantum activation human design session. But it was basically EFT, but done in a different way. So like.
And what is EFT?
EFT is it's like a tapping through the Chinese meridians. It's so hard to explain in a 2 second. But like you have your body has the meridians that the Chinese medicine looks at, and in those meridians your life force or your energy runs through it. It's not like veins in your body, right? It's just energy. So in Chinese medicine, when you're sick, the energy is blocked or clogged in those meridians. So they tap, or they use acupuncture, or they use acupressure, right? So tapping in EFT, emotional freedom technique, right? You tap in, and there's a bunch of spaces on your forehead and under your arm, up top of your head. And when you tap that, you actually have all the different systems, the different meridians in the body you're tapping onto. And when you do that, you speak things or you say things and you release it. And I have to say, going to someone who knows what they're doing is really helpful.
Yeah.
But I was working on, I said, oh, I have so much anger. I have so much anger. I don't know where it is. Meanwhile, I was told to write letters to all the hospitals and nurses that fucked my parents over. And I'm writing them and I'm like, fuck. And then at the end, I'm like, oh, you're only human. Like, I totally understand. I'm sorry you've had this life. My parents rocked and whatever, right? Like, I couldn't be angry. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I said, can you just get it out of me in this quantum activation? And we came to the realization that my parents were not able to be sad. And that, one of the and I realized my dad in the hospital had said, when I told him he had to tell my mom, goodbye because she wasn't going to live, he said, well, I can be angry, but I can't be sad. And I realized that at that point in that reading that I had carried around not being able to be sad. And now I had been through many deaths before. I had many funerals and friends, and I'd never let myself cry in front of people.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't need to be angry. I realized through that, and that was my conditioning. I learned that from both my parents, who were uncomfortable with me being sad. Yeah. And so they couldn't allow me to do that. I could be angry and I could scream and throw things and, but I wasn't allowed to be sad. But I didn't even know. I am 45 and I thought I was fine with sadness.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even understand.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God. And then all of a sudden I cried for like 2 days straight. Like I couldn't even, all of these deaths started coming up and I was like grieving them.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't know. This is what conditioning is. You have no clue.
And I can remember you telling me, stories about like when you had friends that you lost, your parents almost being like, well, why would you cry for that person?
They weren't that close or right.
Yeah. Like, and again, I mean, that comes from whatever conditioning they had. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, my dad was in Vietnam, right? Blown up. Like
Yeah.
my mom had lost. I mean, there was so much sadness, but they never felt it.
Yeah.
So, but here I am, 45 years old, knowing I've gone through all this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not even aware. So that's what conditioning is about. That's, I think, how conditioning affects us. We don't even know it until we pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And so it's just like with unschooling, and you have to deschool if you've had kids in school.
Mm-hmm.
They have no clue the fucking shit they've been through, and it takes like a year to deschool a kid. And now, thankfully, we've never had to do that. But it takes like a year to deschool a kid from having to get up, ask to go to the bathroom, raise a hand to say anything. Like, it takes a year just to get out of that.
Yeah.
And even then, I've seen parents say that it needed to take longer, and the kid didn't know. They had no idea that was their life.
Well, they were. I mean, they were, whether it was active or whether it was unintentional or subconscious, the schedule and the how things were treated, just the idea of having to ask to go to the bathroom, or if assignments are given out in such a way that it's very dictated and there's no creativity allowed or anything like that. All of those things are it's not easy to break free from. You can't just flip a switch and just be like, okay, like one day, I'm not going to do all these things. And what's crazy is, like, the later on in life that you begin to understand that these things were kind of imparted on you, or if you want to look at it from the standpoint of you let it in, or however you want to look at that from that perspective, it is not as easy as just identifying it and being like, okay, I'm just not going to do that anymore.
No.
Right? It's not. It's a very it's an uphill battle, because you're fighting momentum, you're fighting the time and the just that immense I wouldn't call it pressure, but it was just like, if you're influenced by the same thing for such a long period of time, I mean, it gets worn in, right? Like it's almost impossible to get out of that rut or get out of that place,
I mean, and it's so deep. It's like, it doesn't even have to be just parents, just school. It's like the conditioning is from so many places, from your society. I mean, it comes from everywhere. And, and like, so when you're thinking about it and you're like, so you start to think about, like, it actually goes back, I think ancestrally. I really think there are some conditioning that has been, you can look back and find the roots of it fucking like 4 generations prior.
Oh yeah.
Of women doing the same fucking thing.
Yes.
The same choices over and over for no reason other than they were conditioned.
Yeah.
And, and you think about the impact of that.
Yeah.
And, and then if you're a parent, being aware that, you can break the cycle for your kids, like that in itself is, I think,
so this
worthy.
This is also an important point, I think, is that some people will see that that history, or what they would call necessarily like culture or something like that. Some people would say like, well, regardless of whether or not it's conditioning or not, like, you have to pay reverence to that and homage and like keep it going, right? And then other people,
listen, you want to keep a recipe going, that's fine. Grandma gave you a recipe for chicken soup.
Yeah, but like, yes, yeah.
But you don't need to keep the,
But what I'm saying is, there are some people that would look at it purely from the standpoint of, if that was tradition, you need to keep the tradition, right? I would put those more in the kind of like, conservative type camp. Like, that's the way things have always been. That's the way we want to keep them, right? Then there are certain people that are like, quote unquote progressive, where they're like, well, that's old world shit. We need to do new world shit, right? So like, you should break all of those paradigms and stuff like that. There's a place in the middle where you identify those things that come from your heritage or your culture or your upbringing that are positive, and like they bring good things to your life, right? And then there are other aspects of your life that you may determine are negative, or they don't have any place anymore in
or
your
they're
life
not
or anything
yours,
like that, right? Yeah,
right?
like
They're not yours.
yeah, you would not have chosen them for yourself,
Right.
right? And in those situations, you have to be able to try and part ways with those things. And you're not doing it just to do it, right? Like you're doing it because you honestly believe that finding a new transition or a new perspective or a new way of doing things is going to be more positive than, you know, what was imparted upon you, right? And so I think this applies in so many different ways, because you could look at it politically, you could look at it socioeconomically, you could look at it culturally, like just within a family construct, right? Like all of those different aspects of life, you could see those elements of the past that are influencing you that you should hold on to because they're net positives, right? And then there are other things that are elements of the
and
past
maybe
that
those
are
net positives you want to lean into.
well, yes, yeah,
Right? Maybe you realize something that somebody did or something that was given to you, or whatever, and you want to lean into it. And that's but it all starts with questioning, well, why do I do this? Why do I just take this?
Do you think many people do that? I've always
I do it all day long. I don't know about you, but I'm like, why do I want to do this? Why did
I always waver back and forth. Like I'm always like, I ask myself that a lot, right? Like why do I do it this way? Could I do it a better way or a different way?
I ask that about you too.
Well, yeah. Ditto. But no, it's like I'm always like wavering back and forth. I'm like, do people constantly think this way, or do people like again the average Joe, so to speak, or the average Josephine or whatever you want to call them? Do they question the things that they do every single day?
I think that's part of conditioning. I think we are conditioned. You say it all the time. Question? Yeah, I think we're conditioned to get up, have breakfast, go to work, come home, go to the gym, whatever you need to do on the way, have dinner, have a drink, go to sleep. Like, I think we are conditioned to not think about it, to just, we're so conditioned away from, I think we're conditioned as a society or culture, not necessarily like maybe also in like families and stuff, but away from meaningfulness. I really do. I don't know where that comes from. You probably would know. It's probably from your camp. Well, no, the whole idea of like, if we were to find meaning and refuse to do the, just everyday shit, and not, if we all stood up and said, 9 to 5.
Yeah. Well, no, from the from like the
what would happen
from the like Noam Chomsky like manufacturing consent part of the world. There's these like guide rails and these things that are put in place to specifically keep you within certain lanes, right? And we could have a grander discussion about whether those are like whether they occur organically or whether they occur like intentionally with some prescribed architecture to them to keep you in your lanes, right? But at the end of the day, like culturally, a lot of people have these guardrails that are on them where they feel like, okay, well, I'm in this lane, I can't deviate, because if I deviate, it all goes kaboom, right?
Well, and like you say, people are soothed by their once a year vacation.
Well, no, they fight.
They're these things that we.
Yeah, they become accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and they fight to keep it, right? The movie The Internship. This is like this movie is one of the worst reviewed movies ever.
I love it though.
It's absolutely fantastic, right? Vince Vaughn, he was a libertarian at one point in time. I don't know where he is now. Apparently he was a Ron Paul supporter at one time at least. And then, which is the one with the crooked nose, the Wilson?
Owen
Wilson.
Owen Wilson.
All right. So at one point in time, they're like,
with the crooked
nose. There's one point in time where near the end of the film, they're trying to sell like the pizza owner, right? Yeah. The pizza owner on kind of like changing the way that he does business. And Vince Vaughn's like, like, okay. He was like, if you listen to yourself, how does he frame it? He frames it as like, if you like, fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. Right? Like that line is absolutely unbelievable. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. Right? And so it's like people have like many people have these restrictions on them, and they become soothing. Right? Like the restrictions on them become not satisfying, but comfortable.
Comforting.
Right?
I was gonna say comforting.
And so they will actually fight to keep them,
to make it,
and it's because
it's safe.
It's safe. It's consistent, and I think a lot of parents, I think a lot of the institutions that all of us kind of like put a lot of faith into, they reinforce that idea. I mean, like, think of the idea of a guidance counselor in school.
What do they do?
What a ridiculous
the guidance counselor
fucking idea.
I don't know if I ever told you this story, but the guidance counselor no one ever knew me in school because I was just like, I hated school. And the guidance counselor thought I was smart. So they sent the military to my house to give me a test. So see if I wanted to go into, could you imagine me in the military?
Could you imagine me in the military?
Did they do that to you?
Dude, I get fucking shot.
But did you get that done to you?
No, I couldn't go into the military because I had asthma.
Oh, I had them at my front door ringing the doorbell. Because the guidance counselor had me take a test.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know what to do with me. So I took a test, and apparently, like, the number one job for me was like military.
Yeah.
They wanted to send me to war or something. I don't know.
They wanted you to be a bullet sponge.
And so they sent someone to my door ringing the goddamn doorbell, and my dad answered. He was a veteran. He said, "What are you doing here?" Oh my God. Yeah.
How did that end up?
I was like I was, I guess, impressionable. I wanted to be a theater actress. That wasn't going to work in the military. So at the time I had already been accepted to University of the Arts in Philly. So I ended up doing that. But years later, I've told you, I thought I really, I'm having a dad who was in Vietnam and had PTSD. I really wanted to work with people coming back from war. And then I was like, Dad, I'm going to do it. I'm going to join the military so I can, be a therapist for these men coming back to because at the time they had all of those domestic violence things going on with the women in Texas when they came back from Iraq. And I felt really pulled to that. I was already working in domestic violence, and I just was really pulled to that. And my dad said, "You are not going." He's like, "You cannot determine where you'll be."
Yeah, they wouldn't give
and
you
then
that
all
job.
he had to say was boot camp.
You'd be
because I was like, "Wait, I'd have to go to boot camp."
You're a fucking minesweeper or something, like
I had a master's, but I don't think that would have mattered.
No, what you should have done was join the CIA, and then you could have become a crisis actor.
Stop! You're back to Alex Jones. Oh my God!
Look.
How is Alex Jones conditioning people?
Yeah,
deconditioning.
Actually, that's a good question. A lot of people who think that he's deconditioning them might also be conditioning in certain aspects. Like, that's the other thing that you have to hammer home to people is, like, a lot of people on either side of the political spectrum want to assume that the people on the other side are programmed. Right? Like, oh, they're programmed one way. So, like,
what if
a big thing for a while has been that people on the left think that people on the right are programmed by religion.
People on the left and right have always come
and
through
people on the right
system.
think that people on the left are programmed by like this, woke kind of culture, right? They're not wrong, but they're also not completely right either, right? There are people on both sides that aren't necessarily fully programmed by those things, and so that's the aspect. Like you nailed it on the head. Like you always have to ask, like, what am I believing? Why? Am I just following a demagogue, right? Like, am I just following someone who says things that sound like convenient truths, and that's why I gobble it up?
So, like, I was conditioned into holistic way of living but I know that because, like, I was never vaccinated for anything, wasn't even given a TB tests in school, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I was like the only thing I had was mono. That shit sucked. And I was given antibiotics for mono.
What was his or her name that you
It
got
wasn't.
it from?
I was a freshman in high school. I don't think I got it from anybody. I think it just floated down. I don't know. I don't know because I hadn't kissed anyone at that point. Though I did have all kinds of oral surgeons up in my mouth. I mean, I don't know what that says. But no, but I never had anything. So I came into this, but my parents, shut up. My parents were Edgar Casey, believed in past lives and all this other stuff. So I grew up into this.
Yeah.
There were like, look at that's my dad's dream catcher. Yeah. There's, my mom was an aromatherapist and, they grew me up in holistic ways.
Yeah.
So I had a natural, didn't even have to think about it, distrust of doctors.
Yeah.
Distrust of hospitals. And if I put that to the test with their death, I think I was right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, personally, but I have found really good holistic doctors.
So what's also interesting about that is how you get to a belief, or how you get to an entrenched behavior or viewpoint in your life is also sometimes it's important to understand how you got there. It's also important to understand like why it makes sense or why it doesn't, right? So like, for instance, you can get to the right place from a line of logic that you might not necessarily agree with now, but you did back then, right?
Yeah.
And it got you to that point. And now as an adult, you seek out more information and you're like, oh, wow, I can now get to that place from a more kind of like scientific standpoint,
or different
whereas it
direction.
used to be spiritual, or
right.
I could get to it from a spiritual standpoint, whereas it used to be more scientific. And so you have to be malleable in that, like you have to be willing to really kind of like rework your existence, like your reality. Almost.
You have to be willing to look at everything. And when you look at everything, if you have kids, you have to be willing to accept the fact that you might have fucked them up already. Like there is that.
Here's the thing though, like with kids, I think that no one is the best parent on earth. Okay? There's like no such thing as the best parent on earth. All right? It's a matter of whether or not you give a shit.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's the parents that give a shit and there's the parents that don't give a shit. If you're one of the parents that gives a shit, even if you fuck them up, you're way better than the parents that didn't give a shit.
Didn't even give a shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm like, you just take your best shot, right? Like, but from that standpoint, your best shot isn't necessarily just being like, oh, well, this is just always the way that we did it, right? Like we've had this issue recently where, I was raised in a household where it was like, your parents command respect, right? You because they're the parents, you're supposed to respect them as the child, and you're supposed to listen to them no matter what they say. You don't ask why or question or things like that. Or at the very least, if you ask why and question, if they say just do it, you just do it, right? And so, that aspect of things is it's not necessarily something that's built out of necessarily malice. It's built out of
generations,
the generational stuff, right? That came before it, right? And so,
and maybe it gets diluted, or maybe it gets stronger through those generations. Like my parents came from people who were so fucking opposite.
Yeah.
And they took some of the best parts of those people, and they were the black sheep of their families.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure some of that was deep ass shit, like that went deep. But so, like, because my parents come from like the baby boomers. So there's six brothers and sisters. Not all of them are gonna have the same conditioning.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is that what the fuck is, I mean, I just go back to that whole idea. What is conditioning? It's how we've been taught by government, by people, by schools, by everyone around us, by the local coffee shop owner, even anyone can have a part in it.
Yeah.
And
well, that's why, like when I was younger, I really couldn't care about history. Like I really did not care. Like I really didn't see how that affected my life. Right. I was a math and science nerd. I was like, you know what? whatever it is, I can figure it out by, you know, a formula or a law
But it's
or
nice to note here that your
statistics.
mom is very into
Right.
science.
Well, no,
This is something that even though she was like religious, she also was into science, right?
well,
The whole
yes,
time?
yeah, well, yes, yeah. I mean, like it was kind of this like almost yin and yang kind of aspect of things, I guess. But I mean, even you would say when we first got together, I always felt that, like, you know, I math or science could just fucking nail it, like whatever it was, like we just haven't found the answer yet, like that kind of thing, right? And that might be true, but that also could be something where math and science doesn't find the answer for thousands of years,
Yeah.
right? And so there needs to be something to fill the gap, right? Like there has to be something in there where at least you have some kind of sense of what reality is, or a sense of the direction that you're headed in. But the programming that you get when you come, specifically when you come of age, right? Like when you're in school, when you're becoming a young adult and things like that, it's really important that you have a very diverse flow of viewpoints and information. It's extremely
But
important.
you have different. So I was just thinking as you said that, imagine what the programming is for kids like Veronica's age right now, hitting puberty in the schools, especially in New Jersey with what's happening with sex education and stuff. That's really scary.
Yeah.
That's a fundamental part of who we are. And that's really scary what's happening. I think with the programming in the schools.
And it's becoming more and more one-sided. I think that's also kind of the cultural war that we're in the process of. Is it's becoming so sectarian, it's becoming so segregationist in the standpoint of like, okay, well, if you go to public school, this is the education you get, right?
But
and if you stay homeschooled, this is the education that you get. Part of the reason why I like homeschooling is because yeah, if we want to fucking indoctrinate our own kids, they're our own kids, we get to indoctrinate them, right? But if we want to give them a broad education and bring in multiple viewpoints, we don't have to go lobby the fucking board of ed to bring in some outside viewpoint.
This was something that we came to terms with years ago. You had said to me, "Are you okay fighting with the evangelists?" Sure.
Dan says, "You didn't ask the gender of anyone else, Matt. Thanks, bigot."
We're back on it. Look at that.
But
I know, but you know, like I think about you know, it's so hard to watch the bigger programming. And just to take a break from that for a minute, in a way, you know, part of deconditioning, like what I did with the human design and the quantum activation, but it was great. But also another part of deconditioning is just starting to connect and listen to your own self, like, and be quiet, right? We live in a very busy world.
Yeah.
Everything is screens. Imagine how much is trying to distract us from who we are.
Yeah.
I mean, how much out there is there? Watch our kids try to, like, the first thing they do, wake up, can I have the iPad? Like, and it's like, there's everything out there trying to distract you from who you are. You know, as I said to Matt, I always mess you and Cole up. I said to Cole the other day, that's gotta be, it's not just a Freudian slip. I said to Cole the other day, I said, why can't you be just quiet for a minute? And he said, well, because I don't like the thoughts in my head. Like, that's because you never given a chance to be in them, you know? And there's so much distraction across everything that, you know, we don't listen, we don't quiet, we don't sit and ask and trust, and we're, you know, and I think if you want to start working on your conditioning, like, start there.
Yeah.
And just ask, like, say, what do I need to work on?
Well,
and close your eyes.
Something that it's also become extremely apparent to me is that, like, you were talking about EFT before, and we do TM, you know, morning and evening.
We did not do it this evening.
Yeah, we didn't do it this evening.
No.
We're bad meditationists.
I know, we have to be better.
But So many things in life are actually meditation, and you have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
Right. And so meditation is extremely important, because you're right, because every single moment of every single day we're bombarded by all of this outside shit, whether it be media, education, work, culture, family, parents, like all this other stuff, right? The din of the outside world. Meditation is extremely important because it allows you to kind of like either look within, or in the case of TM, just kind of like vacate everything, right?
So
like
we have connected with
try and get past it.
How do you like the transcendental meditation?
I mean, when the cat's not fucking with shit, and
that was so funny.
And when our youngest isn't coming up and asking for things in the middle of it.
No, I for the longest time could not meditate.
Yeah,
I would say to people, "Are you?" And now I, for the most
part,
how many meditate 40 minutes a day.
You know how many people I've talked to who said that they can't sit still for longer than 5 minutes?
I could never do it.
I mean, like a little bit of insight, like transcendental meditation.
Are you?
I'm not giving away secrets. I'm not giving away secrets. It's like a 20-minute process. I mean, like it takes, like, you have to sit there, and it's not like they're gonna like. It's not like there's like an ideal meditation. It's just like you have to dedicate the time, right? And it's at the very least 20 minutes twice a day. And some people guaranteed will say, "Oh, well, I can't sit there for 20 minutes."
I was that person.
Yeah.
I was that person.
Yeah.
And I'm not somebody who, I've done yoga my whole life. I've done like transcendental dance and stuff. Like I've done everything in that field, but I've never been able to say I meditate. And when I would try to meditate, my other meditations would drive me nuts. Like I couldn't do it. Like, and then I'd get frustrated at myself, and I know visualization from being a therapist and like all this crazy stuff, right? And I could always moving meditate. Like I could always dance and lose myself in it, but it's not necessarily meditation at that point, right? And then I wouldn't. Do you remember when I was driving home? I was like, I can't believe it. It's so easy.
Yeah.
I was so taken by how easy it was.
Well, I think the key is that so many of these kind of like I would call them, so many of these like coping things that are sold to people, right? Like these commercial solutions that are put out there, or these courses and things like that. It's always like so many steps and all this other stuff. It's such a simple methodology.
It's so simple,
right? That
it really, I highly recommend it.
It's extremely forgiving, because also you don't feel bad.
No.
Like you don't feel bad if, like,
no,
you just don't get there, right? Like you're okay. I'll just get it the
next
time.
Not that this is a commercial for transcendental meditation, but across, I don't know, the world or just the US. I'm sure it's the world. Like you can go to a TM center and it's like $400, but you get so much for it. Like you can have a live meditation every day and every night, like on Zoom. And then they give you all these like wonderful things that you can get involved in. Like it's totally like the best money I think we've spent.
I gotta say, I was very skeptical, but to kind of like tie it back into my original point, so many things that people do, whether it's traditional spiritual type stuff like EFT, or
well, that's not traditional spiritual.
Well, no, but
it is good if you're looking to decondition.
Yeah, but you gotta remember that a lot of normies will look at you and be like, "Oh, well, you're fucking tapping on yourself."
Yeah,
that's
you do
like
kind
weird
of like
spiritual
tap
shit, right?
across.
Like anything that has to do with like traditional meditation, EFT, like you were talking meditative dance and stuff like that.
People accept yoga and chiropractic
but
now, though.
But there's also all kinds of other stuff too.
Oh, there is.
That people do unknowingly, and it's a form of meditation.
Walking.
Right? Walking alone,
walking at lunch,
even running. I gotta say, like when I was at the office and I was running in the afternoons, if I ran without my earphones and I'm running for an hour, right? Like my mind is just isolated. I'm just thinking about what's going on or what happened or that kind of thing.
Drawing.
That introspective aspect of life is almost kind of lost in modern culture because
and like, well, we were thinking of doing a thing on creativity today, but maybe we'll do it another day. But like, that's the thing, is you see it most in creativity. I think it's like bust open in the idea of creativity.
Yeah.
Like this, it's like the idea of being creative and in whatever form, whether it's cooking or writing or drawing or singing or acting, right? It just it's I think we're lost, just by having dealt with a lot of kids. I teach creativity, so
they have such problems. Like
so
coloring
hard.
outside the lines.
Or in writing, I had a student who said, I can't write about anyone but a white male who's in this age group because that's all I am. Like, this is, and our creativity connects directly into our heart, directly into I believe, our soul.
Yeah.
And if we don't tap into that, who the fuck are we?
Yeah.
It's what makes us human. It's what makes us separate from one another, that inspires. And it doesn't mean you have to be an artist to be creative. That's not what I'm saying. There are many businessmen who are creative in the entrepreneurships they did.
Yeah.
I don't mean to say you have to be an artist, but we don't think like that anymore.
Yeah.
We are programmed to think a specific way, and that's
sad. And it's in silos too, because so many people are either individually they choose to be, or they just so happen to be kind of like typecast into these kind of like cultural alleyways almost, or these cultural silos, where they feel like they have to have all of these viewpoints, that align with a certain type, or they have to be a part of a certain organization because all the other people that share similar values are a part of that organization. And like a lot of what we see nowadays is segregationist type stuff, that it takes that programming aspect of it and it weaponizes it. Right.
And if me and you are seeing that, right? But yet you have a whole bunch of kids growing up in a school system that's really parading that in front of them.
Yeah.
What's going to happen in 12 years, in 10 years?
I'm actually quietly hopeful. I'm quietly hopeful that the how like kids typically rebel against
their parents,
like how they were raised.
Yeah. Are we fucked if we did because of how we raised?
No, I'm not worried about them. What I'm hopeful is that like the other kids will catch up. I don't
know.
Like
I think kids are so programmed in their brains are fucking fried. I really do. I think that like we have such, to me, the one thing whenever I look at like video games,
think about it this way. Let me cut you off for 1 second.
Go ahead.
The parents of kids that grew up with rock and roll in the 60s and 70s, right? The greatest generation was worried that the hippies and the baby boomers from the 60s and 70s, okay, we're going to be all these like free love hippie types, and they were going to be like fruitless and they don't do anything and all this other stuff. And what happens? They end up being thin blue line motherfuckers, and they end up being fucking the flag people,
but there's so
and they end up being
at play right now.
Yeah, but just hear me out. So like they listened to revolutionary rock from the 60s and 70s, and then what happens nowadays? You see some of those artists that are still alive are now like the man. Like they used to fight the man,
but they're not.
Now they are the man, right?
But hold on.
It's almost like their parents like railed against what they were when they were younger, and they kind of like retaliated when they were younger, And then they kind of like flipped the script when they became older, and they basically became their parents, right? I'm wondering whether or not it's going to happen in reverse this go around, where these kids have been oppressed and fucking muzzled and all this other shit their entire life.
They've been impressed.
People are worried that they're going to become drones. I'm actually wondering whether or not they're going to be like the freaking.
I don't know.
Why is anarchism on the rise? Like that's the other thing.
But
right?
here's
like,
the thing: we have never. I don't think ever. I think this last 2 generations, we have never given so many pharmaceutical drugs to kids. We have never done so many experimentations on kids' bodies.
I agree.
Like, I feel like that shit you don't come back from in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like when you start messing with the brain chemistry of, and then I was just watching the Russell Brand. I always bring up Russell Brand. I was just watching the Russell Brand thing on the depression and how it's not actually serotonin, you know. And yet we,
which, by the way, crazy fucking Tom Cruise was freaking born out to be correct on that shit. All right, go ahead.
But no, but we have been feeding kids fucking ADHD medications, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, like just insanity. How do you expect that generation to come back? You know, we have the highest level of autism ever. We're looking at like staring down the barrel of 1 in 28 boys. I mean, how can you expect that generation to come back? We have poisoned them. They spray fucking Roundup in every fucking playground. I was, by the way, horrified that they did that at Randolph in the town next to us. I was just horrified. Like, we have done things to these kids' bodies that is incomprehensible. That was not around in the 60s and 70s.
But again, those things, I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because I mean, like, my theory is that those things having affected that generation so severely,
the next generation,
they'll rail against it. Right?
But
like,
they're not. Look at how many people got their kids vaccinated.
Well, no. But those are, you're talking Gen X,
the next generation,
and older millennial type people, right? Like, those people had really easy lives. Like Gen
X did not have.
No. I'm talking younger Gen X, older millennial, right? Everyone wants to be like, oh, well, like the millennials had it so difficult because they've now seen their parents go through the recession of 08, and now they have to go through this recession. And I would be like, that's bullshit, because in both those recessions, the Federal Reserve just started printing money and just things got automatically better again. It's not like the greatest generation that had to live through freaking the Great Depression for 10 fucking years, okay? They didn't have to live through that, right? They lived through 2 years of like inconvenience. Again,
I go back to.
But what I'm saying is, these kids that are basically, Gen Z and whatever they're going to call the next generation,
their kids.
What I'm saying is, they're living through a time period where they might actually have to deal with some shit.
I mean, they'll have to deal with shit, but you have to remember how much technology has advanced. I mean, we are giving them drugs. We have no clue how they react for no reason whatsoever. Like, I mean, just because we want them to be in line.
Yeah, but look at how dramatic the movement is against them, though.
But then on top of it, you have social media and stuff that's constantly getting instant gratification.
Let me ask you this.
I hope so. Let me ask you this.
Back in the 70s and 80s, okay, even with how popular, and I'll use air quotes, popular, like hippieism was, right? Like, and hippies, okay? They were still only, 5% of the population, right? Like, it wasn't the majority of the population, okay?
Right.
There weren't that many people that were natural living, vegan, like all this other stuff,
Very
right?
True.
So what you have now is you have a group
But
of people.
did that stem from generations, or did that stem from the fucking practices of like the meat industry?
No, but that's exactly what I'm saying. Back then, people were doing it because a very small subset of people decided to look at the world and be like, okay, well, I want pure food, right? They could kind of see the shit before it happened, right? Like, they were the anti-federalists before they were anti-federalists.
Yeah.
Okay. they could see that stuff happening before it happened. Okay. And now I'm not saying that, veganism is like the answer for everyone. But what I'm saying is a lot of people that were within the vegan movement in the 70s and 80s, they were there because they saw factory farming taking
and honestly,
root, and they were like, I don't want factory farm shit.
Veganism aside, you should not support factory farming.
Yes.
That shit is fucked up.
But that's what I'm saying. How many people who now aren't necessarily vegan, but they are carnivore or keto or whatever like that, they're also anti-factory farming. Right? You see that kind of like,
and now we're going from for the animals to for the farmers.
Well,
which is interesting.
Well, no, they're also
for the
one and the same.
Is something that is more easy to follow with a human being.
Well, yeah, but if you think about it, it's also one and the same from a certain standpoint, because the local farmer, local dairy farmer that raises, a couple hundred head of cattle or whatever, right? They're doing things in a much cleaner, more sustainable way than the CAFO in Brazil that supplies 13% of all the beef and dairy for the world.
Every town had a dairy farm that you got your local. I mean, I wouldn't drink it anyways, but like, but if you had a place right in your town, and
I wouldn't go for dairy. I honestly, I would go for eggs, and I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with meat if I felt like it was clean. If I felt like if it was clean and as close to wild raised as possible. The reason why I wouldn't go with, say, like a side of beef from a dairy farm is because those aren't cows anymore. Like, those are cows the way we know cows. Those aren't wild cows. Wild cow, like, if you came across a wild cow, like, look at what the American Indians used to have to fucking do to kill buffalo. Like, legit, one of them would have to put on a fucking buffalo costume. They would have to scare their asses. He would have to lead them off a cliff. I'm gonna come. Okay? Okay? He would have to lead them off a cliff, okay? Those fucking buffalo, if you caught them one-on-one, would fuck you up, okay? A local cow now, like, you could tip a cow. You went cow tipping. You could fucking tip a cow, okay?
What I'm saying is,
wild cows you can't tip. Wild cows, like, I will mess you up.
Back to my story.
But so that's what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a move back to nature. And I think part of it has to do with that kind of pendulum effect of...
Well, one day these kids who have been given drugs their whole life are going to wake up and go, what the fuck? Well, and they're going to have to heal from it.
I think some of them will, some of them won't.
They're going to have to heal from it.
I think some of them will, some of them won't. And the question is whether or not a large enough number of them, like, I mean, just look at the mood. Like, again, I don't want to...
Thinking about the rates of autism, whether it's from vaccines or not, regardless, we went from 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 28.
So there are nuggets. 28. There are nuggets of truth in... Or
was it...
in like entertainment platforms, okay? So the movie Garden State. Do you remember the plot line of the movie Garden State?
I know it was such a good movie, but I don't remember.
So the guy who's the main character, Zach Braff, right, has been put on lithium by his father.
Everyone was on lithium in the 90s.
because he was depressed or because he wanted to sedate him, because the kid got mad at his mom and pushed her one day and she fell and hurt herself and became a paraplegic, right? And so they thought he had like anger problems or whatever. So they essentially put him on fucking mood altering drugs, right? And it wasn't until his young adulthood that he stopped taking the shit. And he was like, holy cow, like, this is the first time I've lived in most of my life, right? I think that's not going to be all kids. That's going to be some of them will wake up.
But there's so many more on it now that you would hope that the wake up numbers would be.
I think more of them are beginning to figure this out. Like, I think more of them are beginning to understand, because the problem is that the come down from this shit is so bad.
So bad. There's going to be so many.
It's so bad, which might actually be an argument for, decrim of marijuana, because
to help
you need something to help transition them
off
or something.
All I know is there are people that we know that had 13-year-old kids who are on antidepressants, anti-anxiety, sleep medication so they can sleep in something so they don't get fat. And that's 4 medications they didn't fucking need.
Yeah.
And they were all messing with.
And then you're like, yeah, I don't want your daughter watching my kids because she's on that. And then the mom's like, well, I'm on them too.
Yeah. Keep that at your house.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You hang out over there.
Like, so we don't actually hang out with typical Americans.
Yeah, no, we like oddball people.
We don't hang out with the people that do this, but we have them in our lives in different ways. And it is scary. And we live in a bubble. We live in our bubble. Because I definitely keep us from people who are like, I just don't want to be around it.
We do and we don't, though. Like,
we don't.
Here's the other aspect of deprogramming. You can't self-isolate. You can self-isolate from the standpoint of whatever you need to do in order to keep yourself safe.
Or speaking to what you need to speak
to. But at the same time, like, we will watch corporate media. Like, you'll watch the five and shit.
But right? I kind of think it's funny, and it's only news I get.
But we'll watch. that's not the only news.
Dying.
But
you tell me the rest.
But you have me to basically rip them a new asshole while they're talking about certain things, or
honestly,
to at least point out the same
stories. It's always the same stories.
Well, no, that's the nature of corporate media. Is they repeat the same things over and over and over again, so that you think they're fact purely from the fact that they're doing it from repetition, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but
yes.
You know, so that's also important. Is like if you're going to be ingesting, you know, some of this kind of like mainstream or corporate media, it very much helps to have someone in your life who is a skeptic, a squeaky wheel, a naysayer, at least to keep it honest and be like, okay, well, you know, what does that mean and why?
I like when Kennedy's on it, and I like when the other guy is on it. But generally, like, if you watch The Five enough, like, and I only started watching it because of my parents, but like when you watch it enough, it's the same fucking story.
Yeah.
Over and soon you just want to fast forward to just see what the news is. Like, what are the big stories?
Well, you can almost tell what they're going to say, right? Like,
you know, yeah.
And like I'll point out like at the beginning of the story, and I'm like, this will be a good conversation if they talk about this, right? Mm-hmm. And if they don't talk about it, then it's fucking bullshit, because then they're just talking about
regular. Sometimes they surprise you, though.
Every so often, yeah. But that being said, how many people actually like? That being said, also, how many times have they had that conversation, and how many times has that one rational talking point come up versus, you know, the dozen other times that they've talked about the same exact subject and they haven't brought it up, right? Like when they're talking about inflation, and none of them talk about the existence of the Federal Reserve as being a problem, right? They talk about
they're also paid. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Well, no,
can't say.
No, whoever the commercials are on they have fucking vaccine commercials on Fox. I mean, like, come on, like
that's why I can't watch it. It's like rough. I mean, you know what? I was really deep in when my parents died. I was like 100% into watching, and I used to put Fox on at like 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. when I wake up till like 10, right?
Yeah.
That shit was crazy. And then I would just fall asleep while I was watching it.
Well, you were trying to...
But I was just... My dad watched it.
You were trying to commiserate with your dad.
I don't know but I never listened to anything.
Yeah.
And now to think about doing that is insane.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't even imagine.
Well, no.
I did that for months.
Think about it this way. How many retirees have Fox News
just running
on their TV all day,
and that is programming,
long, right?
That
like
absolute programming.
How many,
and then it's in the back of your brain.
How many people on the left have fucking CNN or MSNBC on?
Here's the other part of programming, and I talked to it with David, who's a family friend of ours, and we were talking about how in Stranger Things there's a whole scene about how Coca-Cola it's a classic Coke. It's like this commercial being put into Stranger Things, and I was like, you know, my parents had this book. I was fascinated with that as a kid. It was like advertising and subliminal advertising in the 70s, and they used to carve the word sex into ice cubes when they had and they'd have this drink like a Coke, right? But it had the word sex and like carved into, and they would have pictures of it carved into these ice cubes. You can't see that shit. There's no way to see that shit.
Your brain can.
Your brain picks it up, but you have no clue you're picking it up.
Yeah.
Now, a commercial in Stranger Things, you can pick that up. Or like a product placement, you can pick that up.
Yeah.
But you can't pick, like, you can't pick up that shit. And how is that programming? All like, and we were talking about the Disney thing, like all the Disney phallic symbols everywhere. There's no accident there. I mean, like,
well, no,
everywhere.
No, it's I forget the name of the operation, but
that's programming.
It's known. Clint from Liberty Lock Pod, who was on a couple of weeks ago with us, and then a couple of other people have talked about the CIA initiatives in the 70s and 80s to infiltrate Hollywood and basically to implant certain favorable political narratives into and even fully bankroll certain movies and projects that were in favor of what they were doing, right? Like actually a controversial tweet from the Libertarian Party the other day had to do with like McCarthyism and how McCarthy actually underestimated the communist infiltration of the United States. And what a lot of people want to say was like, how dare you, like, be okay with McCarthyism? Which, by the way,
I don't even know. Can you define that for me?
The tweet had absolutely nothing to do with McCarthyism. McCarthyism was this,
You're talking to someone who, like, literally my programming in history class was when you had to memorize paragraphs.
So
right, and I would memorize it for the day, and then I would forget that shit, and then every once in a while they'd throw in a documentary, and it was like fucking from the 1920s. I swear to God. So it was rolled in on a cart. It was old, like you didn't have a remote. You had to go fucking. I'm gonna like. I don't think I'm that old.
So post World War II. Do you remember basically the Cold War that we were in? Okay. The biggest threat after the Nazis were eradicated, supposedly, which they weren't. We just brought them to the United States. It was called Project Paperclip, and we fucking brought them here in order to create nuclear weapons and the space program and shit. So McCarthyism was there was
Why are the Germans so smart?
There was a credible they were very industrious people. So there was a credible threat that,
and among them is a X-rated writer.
All right, that's a far off field. So there was a credible threat that Marxist communists were invading higher levels of the United States political structure. Okay. Which, by the way, is Which, by the way, is an argument against centralization of power in DC because
then they have
the
more
fewer
power.
the seats of power, the easiest it is to infiltrate it. Which, by the way, we have the same exact problem with Chinese infiltration now, but that's a different story. So McCarthyism was essentially a witch hunt. What most people thought was a witch hunt to try and find communist infiltrators within the United States government. And it actually turns out that a ton of people within the U.S. government were either feeding information or directly communist spies to the Russian communist mechanism. And now a lot of people believe and have been programmed into thinking that it was purely a witch hunt and that no one was found, which is wrong. Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
And by the way, the vast majority of the people that were found out to be communist sympathizers, the worst case scenario, they weren't thrown in prison. They weren't treated like fucking Snowden or Julian Assange.
They should not be in jail.
They were stopped from working in Hollywood. That was the worst case scenario.
Let me ask you this as a libertarian anarchist type person.
Yeah.
Do you believe in even spies? Like, do you even believe in spies?
Do I believe in spies?
Because you don't believe in government.
Yeah,
so,
but
it doesn't matter who comes in and talks about what to do.
So
right?
this is an issue that gets talked about, like, living in Capistan in your head. Okay.
What is that? Capistan?
Ancapistan. So like if you're an ANCAP, an anarcho-capitalist. Okay.
By the way, just a plug for the HBO series, we should watch that tonight.
Oh yeah, The Anarchist.
So good. Like it's like really a fucking soap opera of anarchists.
Fantastic.
Are you sure it's good? Because it does not shed a great light.
No, it focuses on some of the more controversial stories that happen within the group, but I think it does do a fantastic. Like we were talking about the fact that like they really do focus on,
but they're ANCAPs,
Shane, right? and the murder that happens and stuff like that.
But the two people are ANCAPs.
Wait,
you would say
the two people that are the focal point of like 2 or 3 of the episodes are, yeah, but it also does focus on the broad spectrum of anarchy and the anarchists that are involved in Anarchapulco, because they're not all ANCAPs, right?
I said to him, these people sound like they're nuts.
No, some
but
of them
at the same time,
you got to remember,
understand the original intent.
But you got to remember, they're focusing on the most sensational stories from multiple years.
But at the same time, these sensational people, I understand. Like, why would Lily and whatever? Of course, they would feel like all of a sudden it's being corporatized, like anarchy being corporatized.
Yeah,
like I get that,
100%.
But also, I'm also not going to be okay selling drugs in the next hotel room.
Yeah, we'll do a specific review of.
We should do a thing on it.
Yeah, but so from that standpoint, the idea of infiltration of government mechanisms, okay, the one thing you have to understand is, if you're an anarchist, you don't want any government mechanism other than what you've voluntarily signed up for, okay? And so if you feel like you haven't voluntarily signed up for something, you don't necessarily want to buy into it. But at the same time, if it can possibly affect your life, okay, in terms of them leveraging the government against you to fight you, okay, you would rather fight people who purport to be for freedom and liberty, okay, and really aren't, right? Like we have now, versus people that are outright Marxist communists, because outright Marxist communists will steal your shit and kill you.
I think I just was like talking about the anarchists and got lost in like, I wonder what happened.
You want to make like a small point?
Yeah, I haven't seen the latest episode. Yeah. So in my head, I'm like, I wonder what. Yeah. And I don't know what you're talking about.
No, but
I want to know.
You were asking about McCarthyism, right?
McCarthyism. So you're saying it was all the people.
So there was infiltration by Marxist communists at high levels of the United States government.
Okay, so
federal government.
Just for when you say McCarthy, Marxist communists.
Yes, yeah.
Explain that.
Okay, so Marxism is essentially one of the more, I guess, severe, you could call it, or absolutist versions of communism. Mm-hmm. This idea that they want to communism typically focuses around the means of production, right? Mm-hmm. They want to nationalize all business because they believe that the laborers should own it.
Right.
The problem is that when it comes to the allocation of capital, which is where you see the denotion between capitalism and communism, typically the allocation of capital when you have nationalized businesses gets all fucked up,
right? It gets spread across.
No, it doesn't. It still is inequitably distributed, but like it gets inequitably
the higher
distributed.
End still get it, but then everything else is across.
No, it gets inequitably distributed in a destructive kind of way. Like here's the difference. In capitalism, some people starve. In communism, most people starve. Okay, with the exception of
who gets the most of the money in a Marxist communist society?
The people that are the highest ranking officials within the communist state.
Is there a Marxist communist place right now?
So
would you consider China?
There are modified versions. I would say that probably Venezuela is a good example.
Venezuela's falling apart right now.
That's why.
Okay, so
Venezuela is an example.
If you had
close to that,
if you had to,
Cuba is kind of like a modified version of Marxist communism.
Another falling apart place.
You want to look at China, which, by the way, a lot of people are saying is falling apart, because a lot of people are.
But what is the difference between China and Marxist communism?
So China is kind of like a blending between capitalism and Marxist communism, or actually like more like Maoist communism. So China is something I would call state capitalism. It's very akin to fascism, where state capitalism is you have companies that have like CEOs and boards of directors. You have
who have
shares of
power
stock in a
within
stock
that
market and stuff like
company.
that. But you
They
have
power.
such a close blending of influence between the
government.
political elites and the corporate elites that
And
they're
everyone
essentially
else
one
underneath
and the
is
same.
like, we don't give a shit.
Which, by the way, the United States is
Close to.
probably very close to exactly the same thing.
So when you say Marxist communism,
Mhm.
and if you used to debate, so if you had to take the side of Marxist communism and debate for me why America should be a Marxist communist country, what would you say?
Why we should be?
Yeah, if you had to take that side of the debate. Not that you believe it, but if you had to fight for it.
I might blow my own brains out.
We always tell the kids they should be able to debate both sides.
Yeah, that's true.
So you debate for me. You tell me why America should be a Well, remember that we're just debating, and I threw this at you. But like, why?
Well, McCarthy's dead, so I don't have to worry about him. But so anyway,
Marxist communist country here.
So if I were to make the argument for Marxism in the United States right now, I would say that. How do I do this without being sarcastic?
You can't be sarcastic in a debate.
I mean, I could make the argument that essentially the ruling class is already a fascist combination of the corporate CEOs and the government, right?
Mm.
So what I would argue is that as a Marxist communist, we should kill all of them, and that we should replace them with people that are more representative of the people, and then nationalize all of those companies that were essentially built by people that co-opted the government and the corporations.
But they would just turn into the same thing. How can you tell me they're not going to turn into the same thing?
Yeah, but again, you asked me to argue.
Well, I'm asking you. I'm
communism.
the judge going, okay, but how can you say those people aren't going to turn into
Well, I would tell you it's exactly the same thing anyway, so what's the point? we basically have it now.
You're killing me.
No, okay. I mean, like, that would be the argument for it now.
Can I make an argument for hippie communes?
Sure.
I think we just have to have a lot more fun.
No, I would make an argument for hippie communes.
What's your argument?
My argument is that if you have a hippie commune that's purely a voluntarist society, I'm all for it. I have absolutely no problem.
What if they didn't have 9-to-5 jobs?
That doesn't matter. Dude,
what if some of us were out?
Who the fuck needs to work a 9-to-5 job? If you can make enough money to live your life.
But what if you don't? Oh, yeah. Here's the other question.
Without working a 9-to-5
barter
job, more
versus. You don't think we could live in a barter society?
That's not
true.
You
think we need money?
No.
You've said that to me in the
past. No. Money is a common occurrence within civilized societies. It doesn't mean that you need it.
But like, so if I wanted to barter,
what I love about barter, you know what I love about barter?
What?
Because the government. There's
there's
no government involvement in barter. That's why I involved.
We should start a barter fucking community on Hive.
No,
is there such a thing?
There's a couple of like barter exchanges, like Amazon type barter exchanges. It always becomes a problem of scale, right?
Like if you want something big but only have something small.
Audio go out for some reason. We got like muted or whatever.
Have it muted forever?
Maybe, I don't know. By the way, this is
What
an
did you
absolutely
do?
fantastic bottle of wine. Unshackled. Absolutely, like fantastic.
It was really good.
Wine.
And so where did we get it? Bottle King?
Is that where you got it from?
That's right. Yeah, we were doing the Libertarian party.
Yeah, great bottle of wine.
But I think, like, I don't know. Do you know what I was saying?
Cave art.
Cave art.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. People don't. So that's the thing, is we are conditioned to think that certain jobs are more important than others. But in the end, artists are just
Rips like our technical support.
Yeah, I feel like he was there fantastic. At 10:46 and all good. So it hadn't been that long.
All right.
I do like you, my friend.
Rip's a good dude. All right. So cave art.
I feel like I'm going to say this for the 10th time.
It's only the third. But
I feel like we are conditioned to think certain jobs are valuable and certain jobs are not.
Yes.
And artists will always get the fucking shitty end of the stick. And I feel like at the same time, they have brought people through so many revolutions that it is in fucking sane. And so it's cave art. People were expressing and communicating in ways, and those ways in the caves and the cave art have taught us so much about history. More than anything else in a lot of ways. It's so interesting to think about that. What they used to do is use their spit in the dirt, and they would find certain kinds of minerals that they could mix in the spit in the dirt, and it would create brown and red. And they would actually create fucking like whole diagrams of shit, like hieroglyphics. I mean, this is before, we're talking way before anything that's, modern age. Or anything. And how important was it that people could express it through their fingers and in fucking paint on a fucking wall? People so I think we're conditioned to think we need certain things, right? Like, and certain jobs are more important. But in the end, we all have our contribution. And I think that's maybe where bartering, because of conditioning, will always find its wall, right? Almost like always find its like. And I say that as an artist who doesn't have much to contribute. Like I can help you figure out how to write, and I'm a therapist, and I can sit there and I can help you decondition, but no one fucking wants that. Like, I can help you free yourself from everything.
But that again,
but people don't want it. It's scary.
That depends on the current state of the world, right?
Yeah.
We're entering into what I think a lot of people expect to be
a dark ages?
A period of time, not necessarily dark ages, but a period of time of huge transition, right? A period of time where a lot of things that were assumed to be a certain way will change to be something else, right? And so artists have always been or at least for a long time have been underappreciated, right? So for instance, a lot of the political critique in even the most authoritarian regimes have come from political cartoonists. Okay. Those are the people
influence the people.
Yeah. Art always has an extremely important place. I think you're also seeing within very recent days, people that have lost sight or de-emphasized the importance of farmers, of truckers, of
the basics,
blue collar trade skill type people, right? Like all of those
or
people
just
that
the
are
power of people in general.
How incredibly prophetic is it that who's the dude who did Dirty Jobs?
Oh, I love him. Mark Rowe.
Yeah, Mark Rowe. Right? Like how he did that show, starting 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and he was talking about people that essentially do the jobs that most people don't want to do. I love his show. But the champagne socialists would not be able to live their life the way that they live it without those people, right? Like, how many times have our kids watched the Hunger Games, and we've talked about the fact that if the people in District 12 and 11 and 10 and 9
it would all fall apart,
didn't do their jobs, it all comes crumbling down because all the people in District 1 and 2 wouldn't have any power, they wouldn't have any food, they wouldn't have any clothes, right? All of those things are extremely important aspects of things. So you asked me before to argue for Marxist communism or whatever. I wouldn't necessarily ever want to put myself in that place, but I would say that, the person who is the laborer who provides the textiles or works the cotton field, or is in the coal mine or whatever, or is in working the oil field, is important. Like, right, like, and you could argue about like what level of importance they have, but to say that they're almost unimportant is completely incorrect, because we're seeing that now. Right?
Oh,
like,
I mean, just think about
with
all
the
the people with
inflation that we have
food.
now, we're seeing that now.
Food is like major.
The most prophetic thing I've ever heard in the last probably like 10 years was this commodities trader that basically said what we are seeing now is the revenge of the old economy. This is the most amazing conversation I've heard, and I can't believe CNBC let this be aired, because it has such huge political ramifications. The dude's basically talking about the antithesis of the green agenda.
Yeah.
Right? The green agenda is looking forward. It's solar, it's wind, it's hydro, it's all this other stuff.
Not giving a shit about anything.
And
else.
This dude makes his living trading futures for like oil and natural gas and stuff. And he was like, you morons lost sight of the fact that you had to continue to make investments here, because there was no way on the planet that you could transition to this other stuff and just ignore what the old economy was based off of. You couldn't do that. You needed to create a glide path. But because you wanted to create a politically be like politically expedite what you thought the end product was supposed to be, you've essentially destroyed the country.
It's coming back to haunt you.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Economics, you can only screw with for a certain period of time.
I keep saying that they're just going to cook the books.
No, they will until they can't anymore. I told you, a couple of people that I follow are calling for a collapse of China in the next 30 days.
In the next 30 days?
In the next 30 days. Because they were basically saying that the Chinese, specifically their property industry, is essentially the same house of cards that we built in 2008.
Or worse, probably, because they had all that building.
So do you understand the concept of I know we're way beyond like deprogramming, but like we're talking about stuff that people don't necessarily understand. Hold on. Rip said bartering will lead to commodity money for
what is commodity money mean?
For convenience.
What does commodity money mean?
So there always has to be a means of exchange, right? There always has to be some way for you to be able to exchange two types of goods. If, say,
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If everyone was doing something they loved, would it matter if one thing was more valuable than another? Like if you loved doing plumbing, and I loved baking bread, and it wasn't an issue for me to do it because I love to do it, and your plumbing cost $400 and my bread cost $20, right? Is it a problem if we love to do it? Is it a problem if we get to a place where everyone loves what they do?
It's a problem if you think you can trade one loaf of bread for $400 worth of plumbing work.
I'm just saying, if it comes down to loving what you do and it doesn't take much, like a bread takes 3.5 hours to make. Plumbing coming in maybe takes 3 hours.
Well, yeah, but you got to understand that it's not just time. Like the amount of time,
that's
resources,
the problem with
training,
right?
Everything like that. Well, that's the issue with bartering, is that the means of exchange, it's very difficult to settle on. Or, for instance, if I am a plumber and you're a baker, but I don't want bread, but you need plumbing services, how are we supposed to do business? Right? Like now you have to find a third or a fourth party to trade your bread to in order to now come back around to get plumbing services from me. So that's why money is an important means of exchange.
I'm sorry. So what is commodity money?
Well, I think so. I think Rip is talking about essentially the idea that your money could be backed by, it used to be backed by gold and silver in the United States, right? Gold and silver are both commodities. They're things that are in relatively limited supply.
They're valuable for a certain amount of stuff,
but they're readily available. You can get more of them, but it takes work to get them out of the ground, right? The problem with what we have now, which is we would consider fiat currency, is you can just print it out of nowhere.
I
right?
think a fiat is a car.
Well, yeah, it's a piece of shit car. So
yeah,
the so
every time I hear you say fiat money,
the analogy
I'm like,
holds.
isn't that a car?
Yeah. So the idea of fiat money is that you can essentially just print it out of nowhere. There's no work involved, right?
Okay,
whereas
you just print it.
Whereas to make more money backed by gold, you would have to
commodity
mine
money is
more
like
gold.
Worked for money.
Yeah, so like a commodity backed money would be something that is backed by one or multiple things that require work and effort and time in order to be able to acquire. Yeah.
And so what is this? He wants to hear about the China.
Yeah, and Rip is basically advocating for reading Tuttle Twins.
We have all the Tuttle Twins for our kids, and even the Choose Your Own Adventures for teens.
Yes.
By the way, you should totally do a commercial for them because they are awesome.
Yeah.
Tuttle Twins.
So, and in fact, I think is it the food truck? The food truck book is also really fantastic. But so,
the thing in China, what is that?
Yeah,
you're saying they're going to collapse in 30? No.
Yeah, no. So
how many people are calling for collapse?
All right. So here's the way China's property industry has worked for probably the last 20 years. They pre-sell units.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never were bought into, right?
So you live in a village. You want to live in the city. So there's been a huge movement of people from villages into cities. Okay. And China
is really want everyone in the cities.
Well, China has really focused in developing cities, not necessarily villages. Okay. And so if you live in provincial China, it's an aspiration for many of the people that live in the village to move toward the city. I would argue that you'd be crazy to want to move in the city. You should stay out in the villages and be fucking ungovernable and plant sweet potatoes.
Not that this has anything to do with what you're doing.
Yeah.
I was watching a reel on Facebook the other day, and it was a nice, I'm going to say Asian lady because I don't know if she was Chinese. But she had these weird things, and she had a fire next to a stream, and she had garlic she pulled up from the ground, and these herbs she crushed from and she made a beautiful dish, and it was totally natural. I don't know if it was China though. I can't tell you for sure.
That sounds fantastic.
It's
so anyway. So talking about the Chinese
the whole time I was like, but what are these things you're cooking? And I thought maybe they could be fish.
So many people want to move from the provincial villages into the cities, okay? Because that's where the Chinese state capitalist structure is placing a lot of its capital investment. It was within the cities, okay?
Yeah.
So they pre-sell units. So if you're going to go move into an apartment or a condo,
they don't raise the price from the pre-sale value.
Hold on. So if you're going to move into an apartment or a condo, what they do is they pre-sell you a unit in an apartment building. And these apartment buildings are fucking gigantic because they have literally over like 1.3 billion people or something, right? So these apartment buildings are huge. So you get, unit 500 of 1,000 that they're putting in, okay? And what you do is you put down a down payment, and then you start making mortgage payments
to that
before you ever have a fucking apartment. So you live in a village,
but you're paying,
and you're freaking hoeing in the dirt and shit, but you're paying for an apartment that you don't have yet. So the last statistic that I saw was over the last 10 years, only 60% of the pre-sale units have actually been completed.
Are they going to complete the rest?
So no. So you have a 6 out of 40 shot, and you pay the whole time, right?
Do you lose that money if you don't get it?
Yeah, because the shit goes down. It goes under. There was a real estate organization called Evergrande in China that filed for bankruptcy protection.
That's
okay.
Awful.
And what's crazy is it's backed by the state of China, like the Chinese state government, and it still went under, right? Because it just
awful. And so you could have been paying for 2 years.
It's basically a Ponzi scheme because the units that they're pre-selling now, they're using the money to finish the units that they already pre-sold
before
2, 3, 5, 10 years ago.
Oh, that's awful.
Okay, and so
I don't like that.
We covered the bank runs as a predecessor to talking about like the transitory depression that we might be headed toward.
But it's okay because it's not a serotonin chemical imbalance. It's we don't know how to fix it.
So, but the bank runs are a symptom of there being a cash crunch in the system, and
people have all this money they paid towards something.
And now the government, I mean, like, you know how oppressive the Chinese government is in terms of censoring, malcontent and protests and stuff like that. There is a movement within China of these people that have refused to continue paying their mortgage payments.
Even because they don't live there.
So you remember what happens in a Ponzi scheme when the flow of income stops, right? The fucking pyramid falls. Right?
So they're saying in 30 days?
So there are people that are calling within the next 30 days that the Chinese, basically the real estate market will completely fall apart. And I don't know if there's any, like, I haven't seen statistics as to how they calculate that 30 days, but it makes sense from all the stuff that I've been seeing because
you went down that fucking hole.
They're seeing bank runs, they're seeing people refusing to pay mortgages. There's like a 200 or 300 billion dollar equivalent US dollar support bill that the Chinese just passed, and there's tons of people saying that's not even nearly enough in order to fill the gap of all these people that aren't paying their mortgages and to like continue to build these units.
How can people pay mortgages for something that's not even built? That shit's crazy.
Rip says, definitely need more wine in the room.
We should put like a wine rack, right? There should be a wine rack. Yeah. We should, like, for fun.
Oh my God, we should just fill it with blood of tyrants.
No, we should fill it with awesome labels because this label right
blood
here,
of tyrants.
this was awesome.
Yeah. No.
I don't know. What is it called?
Dan taxation is
called I'm telling you, they have it at. This is really. I would drink 5 bottles of this. I would be fucking on the.
No, this is really good.
But it's called Unshackled Cabernet.
But seriously, I think what I'm going to do is
like show them the thing. Show them the thing.
Yeah, I already did twice. Okay.
I feel like it's like a decoder.
Yeah.
I knew that's not a good showing.
Yes, it is. So Dan Taxation is Theft Berman in Texas / Mexico. Commissioned his own wine. I showed you. It's called The Blood of Tyrants.
Oh,
we need to get at least. I tasted it. It was really good. I might have been 2 or 3 drinks in at the time.
Was it more than $25?
We gotta check.
Because this was under 25. I really like it.
But we're also
2019.
But
then what does this mean? TPWC V20. 2019.
Well, the vintage is 2019.
Vintage, but what is TPWC? I don't know what half these things mean.
Yeah.
They've got to mean something. I really like it.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. Hold on. Have you deconditioned from your own being grown up?
No. I think
you've got a lot of conditioning.
I think the final thing you have to talk about is that the process of deprogramming.
So wait, there's a few different ways
doesn't
to look at
end.
No, it's constant. And so like in human design, they talk about, so we called deprogramming here because we didn't want to call it deconditioning because that's something that's human design. And I think it's so much further than human design. I think being like a therapist, it's everywhere. And but in human design, they have deconditioning. And so part of that, and you can follow it. You have your whole first 50 years of deconditioning. You hit 50, your Chiron returns, and all of a sudden you have another fucking 50 years of a whole new kind of deconditioning.
Yeah.
It's constant. It's totally constant. And the way to deal with it, coming up, and this is like, we've talked about the Phoenix, the sleeping Phoenix, which I want to get someone on. I'm going to work on that for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We've talked about the sleeping phoenix, and part of the way that you're supposed to be able to deal with this is to decondition and work with your strategy and authority in human design. Like you just have to, that's the work we do now until 2027 is looking at your conditioning. So, and the way to deal with your conditioning is to figure out how you're supposed to respond in life and follow it. And so 60%, I think it's 60, I could be wrong. I never want to talk with any kind of confidence on human design because I never did anything with it, but I just listen.
60% are
I feel like
generators?
60% are generators, but then someone the other day said 40%. So I could be wrong, but 60% of people are generators. And those generators have an authority. So you have emotional authority. I have sacral authority, but everyone, I've met so many people with sacral authority where it's so easy. Just ask yourself a question and have the first response. And that response is your answer. And that's how you break your conditioning. It's that fucking simple in human design. In psychology, it's a lot more difficult. In psychology, you're looking at, the layers of relationship and like, and then in spirituality, it's like go for a walk.
Yeah.
It's like feel your breath. It's like actually be present with yourself, which to me at this point is very easy, but to many people is still very, very hard. I would say you're still having a hard time with it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, like just that, be quiet with yourself, be present with yourself. But there's so many ways to do. I mean, the first thing you have to do is just ask the question, why? Why do I do this?
Yeah. Or why do I feel this way? Yeah.
Yeah. And then do I want to continue this?
Yeah.
And if you do, who cares, right? Because it's already a pattern. But if you don't, like that's where you start to change shit.
Yeah.
And imagine a whole generation of people that started to look at their conditioning. That's the real change, not the kids on the drugs, not the kids like coming through this. Like that could be the real change.
Yeah.
Is an entire generation going, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why do I treat people this way? Why do I feel like this is what I need to do?
Well, I think that's why a lot of people come to, liberty or anarchy or libertarianism is because they ask the why question. They're like, why have we done it this way for this long? Like, why would you make that choice? Or, why do we defer to authority in these situations or things like that? And I think it's a very powerful question because, like, think of like it really gets my dander up when our kids ask why, right? Because I was raised in that house
where can't it was ask like, questions.
I'm the dad. I said it, right? Like,
I try never to say because
who cares why I said it. Like, you're gonna do it, right? And I think a lot of people have been raised in something similar that kind of setup where it's like, the elder statesman or the paternal or maternal figure, they said it. So who gives a shit why, right? Like, who gives a shit why? You're going to do it, right? It's replicated in the educational process. It's replicated in the political process, right? Like, well, why should we do that? Well, because I fucking said so. Like, why should we defer? Why should we defer to the police in these particular situations? Well, because they're the police. That's why. Like, it's something that's it's an extremely important question. And here's the other thing. When you're deprogramming, if you ask the question why, and someone who is a proponent of you doing something, you're asking why are we doing that?
There's not really an answer.
They refuse to answer, or they defer, or they say that just because, or because I said so, or something like that. Dude, you got it. Like, that's a major red flag the moment that happens. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the wrong thing to do or the wrong way to act, but it means that the person that's telling you that, or it means that how you got to that point isn't necessarily from a logical standpoint or a calculating standpoint. It's from a programmed standpoint.
And you can't judge yourself from that because we do our best with what we have.
Yeah.
When I was first deconditioning from my parents, and I'm still doing it, it's a constant thing. It's constant. You're never not fighting the shit that's coming at you, right? You're never not fighting it. And to think about like, okay, why or where does this come from? Why do I have this, right? Not all of it's bad. Some of it you want to hold on to. and some of it you want to let go of.
Hmm.
But you have to know it all, and then as soon as you know it all, there's a whole nother set that comes behind it.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you're like, okay, I can feel this. Oh, fuck. Like there's always another one, and it's this like constant move towards just knowing who you are and what you want. But what, you want to talk about freedom and anarchy. What ultimate freedom and anarchy is that? Just literally knowing what you want and why you want it and how you want to do it. And
well, it's like, I think a lot of people are attracted to the word anarchy because they think that it means defiance, or they think it means resistance,
chaotic,
or something, which in some sense it does, but it's not uncalculating. It's and it doesn't mean that it's
it feels a lot like Wicca to me.
Anarchy does.
Well, when we were talking to Ace the other week,
yeah,
it felt a lot like that to me. People consider it to be something totally like satanic.
Yeah,
sacrificing babies.
Well, no, it's.
But in the end, it's just, and it has definitely laws to
misunderstood. I think a lot of people. I think the anarchy light being libertarianism, I think, is the same way. I think a lot of people are attracted to libertarianism because they believe that it means something that's contra to the current status quo, which is not wrong. It is. They just don't understand why it is or how it is, right? And so they come to it and they think, oh, well, I'll label myself as this, and that means that I'm, it's like, punk rock got co-opted by the woke left, right? So now people are like, okay, how can I be punk rock? Oh yeah, I'll label myself as a libertarian or an anarchist.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, just because you label yourself that doesn't mean that you know what it means, or it doesn't mean that you understand like where you're coming from that standpoint, right? Like it's like just because you want to call yourself something doesn't mean
want to be against a grain,
that you truly understand.
You have to.
What is it in White Men Can't Jump? He's talking about
that movie since the 80s or 90s.
He's in White Men Can't Jump. They're talking about, is it Gladys Knight or shit, I can't remember the singer that they're talking about, but they're like like, can you hear him? And he was like, yeah, I can hear it. Like Woody Harrelson's like, yeah, I could hear him. And like Wesley Snipes is like, no, can you hear him? He was like, yeah, of course I can. He's like, no, you can't. He's like, you can't hear him. It's exactly like that. It's like you have some kind of inclination of what it is, but you truly don't appreciate it or understand it unless you like fully dive in.
Well, I mean, isn't that everything?
Well, yeah.
I mean, in the end,
it's okay. It's okay to be curious or interested or have your interest piqued by something. Okay. I think a lot of people in this day and age have a how should I put it? A very it's a very weak idea of what it is to be something.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're just like, oh, I read about it in a book once. I'm that. And you're like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Like you might
like it's not that simple.
You might feel drawn to it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually engaged in it,
It's interesting because I just think about all the ways in which we have things kind of. I think about the time I did mushrooms and how I wanted to be like in the womb. So I had all these blankets put on me, right?
Yeah.
That's like kind of when you were a kid, right? All these blankets are put on you, and these ways of definition,
safety and everything. Yeah.
You're right, the weights and everything. And all of a sudden I got to a point where like, get that shit off me. And I threw it off. Right. And like, and it was invigorating. And man, I went to the next level of my trip in that.
Yeah.
Right. Like it was all of a sudden, it was like, oh my God, I found freedom. Like I like rebirthed myself.
Yeah.
But like, the idea of just, thinking about all the layers that have been put off and just that freedom that comes from that.
Mhm.
But it's never easy. I
Mm.
had to be almost hyperventilating under all those blankets. I thought I was gonna die.
I would imagine. I would imagine there's a lot of people that can draw a parallel to that with how immersed they either allow themselves or actively get themselves into, their family's culture or the people around them's culture, and then they get to the point where they feel like they're choking on it, or they're like, and they're like, okay, I've had enough of this. I need to, break out from it and take the good with me, right? But also find kind of like my own way, or figure out where it's not working, and kind of like do my own thing.
Well, you just never know where, and like I have tons of more conditioning to go through, and so do you, and maybe we'll bring someone on that can kind of talk a little bit to it.
Yeah,
maybe I'm going to come on.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting because it's the good work.
Yeah,
and it's the work that won't leave you feeling.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's like I started with the Buddhist thing with the wounds, right?
Yeah.
The wounds are the healing places.
Yeah.
You have to accept the wounds because they show you where you need to heal, right? And in the end, it's just really getting to a point of, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. And then when I deal with that, I got another round.
It is something where you're kind of like,
it's forever.
You have to continually swim to, I guess, the bottom or the top, like, and you're continually pushing things out of the way. So like, once you get past the first thing,
but it feels good each time.
There's another. Yeah, like,
and each time I feel like you get your gifts. Like there's so much there.
Yeah, it's you definitely gain clarity every single time you kind of break through one of those levels, but all right.
Did we talk enough about conditioning?
Oh, this is like, we definitely have to
for a while.
But we definitely have to have someone come on.
I'm gonna see if I can get Emma
talk specifically about it. So,
I'm not a very exciting person.
A reminder: we will be back next week
with Shane Hazel.
9 p.m.
talking holistic shit.
We're gonna talk like health stuff, because
he just went anti-federalist.
He just went through some health stuff. We'll talk anti-federalism. I always love having Shane on to talk some anti-federalism.
I want to meet him. He talked about our kids with you, and I didn't get to talk to him.
We'll talk about kids and raising family and stuff like that.
Does he homeschool?
He does, in the north woods of Georgia.
I don't like Georgia. Is he from Georgia?
Wait. I don't know if he's originally from Georgia, but maybe he'll convert you. We'll see.
To a Georgian?
I don't know.
Georgian? Yeah, I'm not moving to Georgia. Do they have 4 seasons?
We'll definitely get the lowdown on how he feels about Stacey Abrams.
That'll be a fun week next. I'm gonna put that on my
next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll be with Shane Hazel. We'll talk about all that stuff. If you've made it this late in the evening,
thank goodness.
Yeah, God bless you.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a spiritual person, but definitely like, comment, subscribe, share, help us get this out there. We are not monetized on YouTube or Facebook, nor do we ever want to be, but this helps the algorithm get it to more people. So we appreciate anything that you have, any help that you can give to us. And I
think we should put a wine. I really think we should put a
wine rack. I don't know.
I feel like Rip is right. We need a fucking wine rack, then we just go to the fucking store and get like 5 cases and just put shit in there.
I think I need a wine rack.
And then you go over with a blindfold and you're like, which one is today?
I think I need a wine rack that's full of the blood of tyrants is what I think I need. Just because of the name of it.
This one is so good.
We'll figure it out. So with that,
destroyed your cork.
Thank you for joining us. We will be back next week at 9 p.m.
with Shane Hazel.
Eastern.
I'm so excited.
Shane Hazel. So definitely check it in. Any last words, comments, anything like that?
Today is something about Lionsgate astrologically.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. It's like you should have felt today your purpose in life, maybe. So if y'all felt any kick, any like,
Okay.
That's like you said. Do that again.
Huh?
Yeah. No more feeling. No.
Yeah.
No, you had a guttural. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It might have been your purpose showing up. I don't know. I saw that, but I didn't feel it personally today. But I was like, I saw that and I was like, I should feel that shit. That's what I want to feel. So if you felt it,
good on you.
Yeah.
Good on you. You're there with it.
I want to feel it.
You're
I'm not
spiritually
feeling
connected. All right. With
I
that,
have to pee.
we are. That's the perfect end of this episode. One bottle of wine in.
I had 2 beer before.
Yeah, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem.
I need to pee.
That's the end of the
All of a
episode.
sudden, I need a cigarette and I need to pee.
We will see you next week. Peace.